The Philadelphia 76ers have some of the most talented young players in the league. Between Embiid, Fultz and Ben Simmons, you would think they have enough talent, but then you look down the roster and see guys like Dario, Saric and Covington, as well as their new draft pick Zhaire Smith. It is largely for this youth that people predict them to be the upcoming dynasty of the NBA. But one player on their roster stands out in terms of his age. Their starting shooting guard is entering the older years of his basketball career, but still has the elite levels of fitness and devastatingly accurate jump shot that has seen him get better and better with age. Yes, none other than JJ Reddick. While he might be the oldest major contributor on the 76ers, he remains one of the most important, and this video will take a deep dive on his game and how he helps make the 76ers tick. JJ will be entering his 13th season in the NBA this year, and in every single year, he has seemingly gotten better. Over his first 3 years in the league, he came off of the bench in limited minutes, but still managed to shoot strong percentages from deep. Then, he took the leap in 2010 and became a consistent role player, scoring 10 points a game and shooting 40% from 3. From this point on, Reddick would improve every year until he was traded to Milwaukee and ultimately signed with the Clippers after his brief Bucks stint. Here at the Clippers, he would spend 4 years on one of the best teams in the NBA alongside Blake Griffin, DeAndre Jordan and Chris Paul. But they could never overcome the hump of the second round of the playoffs, and injuries consistently brought them down and prevented them from true team success. Another thing that could have potentially brought that team down was the chemistry. Doc Rivers made an interesting comment recently that you can tell a team gets along by how they play on the defensive end. Teams that get along with each other will put the effort in and look out for each other on the defensive end of the court. Teams that don't tend to focus on their own man and less on the overall scheme. Many believe that this comment was aimed at the Boston Celtics of 2008 to 2012 and the JJ Reddick Clippers squad, hinting that maybe the Clippers didn't get along and it cost them the success that they so desired because they couldn't play defense like the Boston Celtics. The end result of it all was Reddick making his way to the 76ers last season on an absolutely huge $23 million contract, and he was worth every single penny. JJ brought leadership to the 76ers last season and helped transform their work ethic and the professionalism required to bring it every single night on the court. He also turned in the best season of his career, averaging 17.1 points per game while shooting 42% from the 3 line and also dishing out 3 assists, as he found himself with the ball in his hands more than he had in LA. And the spacing he provided was integral to the 76ers last season. As people have discussed ad nauseum, the 76ers simply need as much spacing and shooting as they can get. Ben Simmons is the biggest reason for this due to his game being completely made up of driving. But Joel Embiid needs just as much spacing when he wants to post up on the block and go to work with his fantastic footwork. Before they signed Reddick, the 76ers had Saric and Covington as their main threats from deep. And while each guy is a great 3-point shooter, they don't have the same gravity effect as Reddick. Both Dario and Covington are more stationary floor spacers. They get into position on the wing and wait for the ball more than moving. This isn't to say that they don't cut at all. They definitely do. But they are not in constant motion like JJ is. Reddick is one of those rare players who simply never stops moving off of the ball. His fitness is simply off the charts, and this motion forces a poor defender to have to chase him around the court relentlessly all game. Most players simply can't keep up, and teams have to dedicate a guy to defending him and let them be relieved of a lot of their normal offensive duties. And the magical thing about this running is that Reddick doesn't require any time to steady himself before rising up for his shot. He will catch the ball and jump straight into the air, with his body still moving in the direction he was running. Shooting the ball with this body movement is incredibly difficult from 10 feet, let alone from the 3-point line. And JJ manages to make these things sink with a percentage that puts most other shooters to shame. Not only does the motion of Reddick's movement help him get open, but it scrambles defenses and forces them into mistakes. Sometimes teams will switch players onto JJ when he comes off of a screen, and a few times a game both players will end up chasing him out to the perimeter, leaving a wide open lane for the other man to slip to the basket. And when Ben Simmons has the ball in his hands, that cutting man is going to get the ball a large percentage of the time. This is the beauty of Simmons. People have criticised him immensely for not being able to shoot and for only being able to drive, and I even heard some people describe him as a one-dimensional player. I honestly can't believe my ears when I hear things like this. Yes, it would be great if Simmons could shoot, but he does every single other thing in the game of basketball well. One of those being his exceptional passing. Simmons is first and foremost a willing passer of the ball. It doesn't stick in his hands and he will give it up to his teammates a large percentage of the time. And due to his height, he can whip passes inside to those cutters when teams make mistakes. Or he can hit shooters in the corners with cross-court passes or on the wings when the defense collapse onto him. But one of his pet plays is combining with Reddick's off-ball movement. Simmons will move towards Reddick and then execute a dribble handoff to create a pocket of space for JJ to shoot from. His huge frame makes it so hard for Reddick's defenders to get around, and it's almost like a quarterback's pocket to throw from. And due to JJ's range, he can shoot from here even when it is a foot or two back from the actual 3-point line. These kinds of plays look easy, but require fantastic timing from Simmons and incredible shooting ability and confidence from JJ. And this is where the experience of being in the league for 12 years comes in. Reddick has been in these situations over and over again and has played in 98 playoff games. He's experienced and knows what needs to be done and doesn't let the pressure get to him when he takes these huge shots. And this showed in the playoffs for Philadelphia as he took the scoring reins and led the 76ers to a series win against Miami. He averaged 20 points a game against the Heat and dropped 28 points in the first game before dropping 27 points in the closeout game, stepping up to show the young fellas how to do it. And then against Boston, he was one of the better players on the team again in the first 3 games, averaging 20 points as his team went down to a 3-0 deficit. While he couldn't drag his team back against Boston, he set a fantastic example that this young team needs. And his team is going to need him again this upcoming season. JJ signed another deal for $12.5 million and took a big pay cut to stay with the 76ers. And I think this is likely what he will do for the next few years. After such a huge amount of money in his contract last season, he can continue to take a little bit less and less each season to stay with the contender. It also means that if he continues to play really well, the 76ers will have to continue to pay him really, really well. The flexibility for both sides is great, and means Reddick will get paid fairly, something that is beneficial for both parties in this role. He'll be just as important to this team, and I predict he'll be in the starting lineup as they move Dario into a 6-man role to allow Markelle Fultz to start. Fultz isn't the same 3-point shooter that Dario is, and so the spacing will get a little bit more congested. But in a different vein, Fultz projects to be another guy who can attack the paint and break down defenses and will need strong defensive coverage anyway. Because all defenses will be worried about is how they're going to stop Simmons, Embiid and Fultz in the one possession. Reddick and Covington will be asked to do one thing: get the ball to their big 3 creators and move off the ball to get open and sink threes. There isn't a more perfect situation for JJ at this point in his career, and I think he'll be crucial in ensuring Philadelphia's success. In the regular season, I expect much of the same, around 16 points a game and just being a consistent floor spacer and leader. But it will be in the playoffs where he'll be really asked to step up. In the playoffs, teams will dial in on Simmons and Embiid even more than usual, and this will allow Reddick just that little bit more space. He absolutely killed this in the playoffs last season, and if he can do it again, he'll be a huge asset to the 76ers. Which asks the question, how deep is this 76ers team, and can they make a deep run in the playoffs? The first thing to consider is that both Marco Bellinelli and Ersan Ilyasova have left the team. These 2 guys were great players for the 76ers last season after they were signed, and were big parts of the playoff rotation. The 76ers will have to find ways to replace that production. And one of the ways they will do this is by moving Dario Saric to the bench for Fultz in the starting lineup. Doing this will allow them to still have an incredible starting 5 and then construct that bench around Dario. I expect the key guys to go alongside him will be TJ McConnell and Wilson Chandler, and to me, the other spots are all up for grabs. Amir Johnson played backup big minutes, but he is a year older and looked slow at times last year. Mike Muscala is an interesting option as a guy who can shoot and grab rebounds, and then there is the young Australian project in Jonah Bolden, who is thin as a rake but moves his feet well, has insanely long arms, and can shoot threes. Bolden is the most interesting of all 3 long term, but I think he is a while off, and the Muscala and Johnson are more likely to get consistent minutes this upcoming season. But this leaves a spot on the wing off of the bench, and I think Philadelphia envisaged Zhaire Smith being this player. But foot surgery will keep Smith out, and I wouldn't be surprised to see Furkan Korkmaz get the nod for a bench role. He is 6'7", has a decent handle on offensive moves, but most importantly, he is smoking hot from 3. Korkmaz impressed in the Summer League and even managed to drop 40 points on the Boston Celtics in one of his games. The only reason he hasn't been getting many minutes is due to his smaller frame and the defensive deficiencies he suffers because of it. And Brett Brown is a defense-first coach. He values players who go out there, compete, and lock down their man or play a team defensive role. If players don't or can't defend, then they simply won't get minutes under this coach. This was the problem for Furkan last season, and it could be a problem for him this season also. But he appears to put on some weight and might not be as bad as he was last year in this area. It will simply come down to effort for him on that end. And due to Smith's injury, he will get the chance to at least prove himself in 10 to 15 minutes a night to start the year. If he can defend at a decent level, he will almost certainly keep those minutes. With such a pure jump shot, he would add a great dimension to the bench unit. McConnell and Johnson as the 1-5 duo, surrounded by Saric, Wilson Chandler and Korkmaz, is actually pretty decent for the regular season. But in the playoffs, the minutes tighten up, and I think Saric, Chandler and McConnell will grab the playoff minutes, but they'll need one of the big men to really play well to back up Embiid. Otherwise, they'll have a hole that teams can expose if they manage to get Embiid into foul trouble. And this lack of true bench depth and security means that there is a strong chance Reddick will be required to play a big role come the playoffs. The shorter the rotation and the lack of shooting guards on the roster means that he will need to have deep minutes in his 13th playoff trip. But Reddick will be ready for it, fit as ever, with a consistent release and an incredible amount of running. Just like in Los Angeles, he has truly become that fourth guy on offense. Fans might not immediately think of him when they think of the 76ers, but he is almost just as important as the stars, playing a selfless role, leading the young kids, and putting fear into the hearts of opposition fans and coaches alike. Thanks for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, be sure to leave a like and subscribe for more NBA videos in the future, and let me know in the comments what you think of JJ Reddick and the Philadelphia 76ers this upcoming season.